Hello and welcome to Monday Motivation. Now, last time we started talking about some myths and there's a lot of myths around horse riding and horse training and what the best thing to do is for your horse. And we started to say, well, there's a lot of these things that have been happening for a long time aren't necessarily great for the horse or for you or for the combination of the two of you. And the one I want to talk about today is one of my favorite ones to dispel, not to hear, is that my horse needs miles under his belt. And this is often used as an excuse to run young horses ragged, really, and especially those little horses that have just been broken in, which are often way too young. But that's another myth we can dispel at some other stage. But quite often these horses are sent off to trainers as 2.5-year-olds or 3-year-olds, and the trainer will assure you, because they've only got the horse for 4 to 6 weeks, that they'll ride it for at least an hour a day. And my feeling to that is, oh gosh, you take a horse that's been standing in the paddock for 2, 3, 4 years, however old, hopefully it's older, older than 2 or 3 anyway, before you start it. But if it's not, anyway, it spent its whole life standing in the paddock, and then suddenly it arrives at the trainer's place and it gets a saddle thrown on its back, and within a week or two, they're riding it for an hour a day. Now, it's impossible to think that that is not going to hurt the horse. It really is. And yes, Felicity says way too young to be sent home for hours of wet saddle blankets. Yeah. Oh, that expression. Yeah. What does that mean? I mean, I could chase my horse around the round pen for an hour and it would get a wet saddle blanket. It means nothing. Horses repeat what they practice, don't they? Or they repeat what they practice. So if they can do something a number of times, they'll keep doing that. So if they're in the round pen and they're getting their wet saddle blanket, or if they're under saddle and they're bucking or doing something, that is just more reinforcement that they're going to do that in future. If they're tired, they're not learning. If they're hurting and if they're babies and they're being put through masses of work where they've got to go in a different posture than they're used to when they're standing in the paddock, so they're using different muscles which haven't been trained to work yet, then of course they're going to be sore. And so if they're in pain, they're not learning either. And we've got to take all these things into account. It's all very well to say, wet saddle blankets or miles under the belt. It has a nice little ring to it, and it sounds quite simplistic. All I'll do is take my horse out for hours of trail riding and then it'll be fine. Well, that's probably not the case, because what you really want to do is build the horse up to that. And if we think about it in the same way as we do with our children when we send our children off to school, imagine sending your little kids off to kindergarten and then having the teacher run them around and around the playground like lunatics, chase them around the playground before bringing them in to teach them how to draw or paint or add up 1 and 1. I mean, it's a ludicrous thought, isn't it? And then you don't send your child to school for hours and hours and hours. You send your child to school to be taught something. They go there to learn the lesson, not to be physically tired. And we've got to think about the horse in the same way. We've got to think, okay, let's say you've got an hour. You're lucky you. If you've got a whole hour to spend with your horse, that's great. Even if you're starting the horse, take that hour and actually teach it something useful. So the last thing you want to do is waste any energy. Yeah. If the horse can learn the thing at walk, teach it at walk. If you're teaching canter changes, you've probably got to teach it at canter. But you're not going to be teaching that when the horse is young, when it's getting the miles under the belt. You're not teaching canter changes. You're teaching something like getting to the engagement zone, stay with me, concentrate, step your right foot to the right, step your right foot to the left. You're teaching simple things like that. There's no need to do that in a higher pace than walk. I always say when I'm starting horses that if they're sweating by the end of the session, I've done a really bad job, unless it's a stinky hot day. And sometimes here in Queensland, it is a stinky hot day, which is lovely. And if I'm sweating too, then that's okay if we're both sweating because it's hot. But if the horse is sweating, I've done a bad job because I've wasted that energy. Because as soon as the horse started to get tired, he stopped learning. He stopped engaging with me. So the best I'm going to do is make him slightly resentful the best I'm going to do is have him not really want to come back and try again tomorrow. I'd much rather leave the horse, you know, where he's feeling, gosh, that was quite interesting. I didn't get tired. I didn't get scared. I got, that was quite fun. I wonder what we'll learn tomorrow. And that's a much better attitude for the horse to be able to have. And it's simply, if we go for this miles under the belt thing, we don't give the horse that opportunity to ever think like that, because the horse is too busy thinking, oh God, that was really hard, you know, I hope I don't have to run around anymore, or this person weighs a hell of a lot. The other thing is, when you do send your baby out to be broken by a trainer, and I don't think you should do that, because I think you should start your own horse, be aware that there's very few trainers out there that fit saddles to horses. You know, most people, and I know when I went to the States, you know, everyone had a big Western saddle that they called their rough out saddle. And that was the saddle you threw on the back of every horse. Every horse fitted the same. Well, you know, I mean, let's be honest, a Western saddle really doesn't fit any horse, let alone every horse. So they'd throw the saddle on, and it's a rough out saddle. It's going to be rough. You know, people are going to get hurt here. The thing is going to end up on the ground. So when you then put the rider's weight on top of that, on top of your baby that has no top line muscle, you cannot expect that not to end up with some sort of pain issue with the horse, is for sure. And that, of course, breaks rule number 2, the horse can't get hurt, which quite quickly breaks rule number 1, and we can't get hurt because the horse gets jack of that and gets rid of us. Very sensible too. So I think it's great if you can get if you want to get your horse fit, let's talk about that in a sec. But if you can get all your training done, if you can get your lesson taught without that wet saddle cloth, if you can get that lesson taught without having to go the miles, then brilliant. Do that. You've done a good job, and you've left your horse wanting more. If you're training an eventer or some other sort of competition horse that needs to be physically fit because it needs to cover miles, then get your miles under the belt. That's great for building muscle. You know, go and do your canter laps up and down the hills, and trot is even better. And go and do that. That's fabulous for fitness work. But as I always say, you know, there's only one more dangerous thing than an unfit, uneducated horse. And that, of course, is a fit, uneducated horse, because it can go for a lot longer. So I have to say, when I take the saddle off all my babies after their first ride and their second ride and their third ride and their 24th ride, they're never sweating, unless it's a stinky hot day. So here's wishing you a nice warm day, but not a stinky hot day. And I will see you tomorrow, and we're going to talk about the same thing. So how do you do that? You know, how do you start your horse without the wet saddle blankets, without the miles under the belt? And we're going to go into the Can Do Equine online training, and I'm going to show you how, step by step. See you tomorrow. Bye.